Am I gonna get fed? There's like a table, I'm leaning on it. I feel like I'm alone in an airport.
What's the second question?
God, that's a great question.
Let me see that. I'm curious if you're just making this up at this point.
I will never be seen on camera, nor my voice heard. It's one of those things where you kind of have to reiterate the question and the answer.
Hey, then you have a shot at a hit.
Do you think emotionally questionable people are drawn to stand-up/performing?
It was a way for me to deal with my chronic shyness and introversion.
I'm crazy already, so don't try and make me the responsible one.
Or are they done in by the life that opens up to them?
I don't know if all comics go through this, whether you go, I'm never going to be funny again. I don't know how I was able to go this far.
But I always assert that the funniest people aren't comedians, just like the best-looking girls aren't models or whatever. Yeah. And you'll meet people that are shoe store salesmen that are fucking knock you over.
Yeah. And then it's just my job to sit there and yell at drunks.
And that's kind of the difference between comedy and theater.
But I can do that. I'm from a large family.
It's okay if I use all that, right?
Use whatever you want. You know, here's the thing, that you could use whatever you want, because what's going to happen? That you're going to get people, they're going to not call me. They're already not calling me. So it doesn't matter what I say.
The Mexicans, the Jews, the blacks, the Irish. Not a lot of funny Germans.
It'd be much better if you were mediocre. Because if you were mediocre, then you would actually have to get good at something else, and, you know, comedy would be just something you do by the water cooler. But if you're truly brilliant at being funny, then, yeah, you can guarantee that your marriages are not going to work and your kids will turn out fucked up.
Well, this is a deep question.
Action!
All right.
Right?
What's the name of this thing?
Misery Loves Comedy.
And do you think that's true?
Well, that's the last question, so wait.
Okay.
My dad was always the funny guy of the family.
My dad made me laugh a whole lot.
My dad.
My dad. My father.
My father was probably the first guy that I said, oh, man, he's funny.
It wasn't that his jokes were great, but I could see the silliness, and I saw that how much fun he was having making other people laugh.
And he always had a ton of, like, basic, like, down-the-middle street jokes, and I would see him, like, kill. He loved... Can I swear?
Please, yes.
He also loved, like, shit jokes and fart jokes, so I still don't like him because that's my rebellion. He told me, he said, if you swallow gum, your shit comes out like a yo-yo. And I didn't find out until years later that he was lying. He would just make up these crazy stories about my life. He said, there's this Pakistani dish called biryani, that's my favorite. And he said, oh, it's because when you were a little baby, we dropped you in a part of it when we forgot. And I didn't know until I was 13 that that was a lie, because it was just part of my reality. I was like, oh, yeah, that's what happened to me. And he was like, no, I was just trying to impress your mom. Like, he was flirting with my mom. I'm like...
As you were 5 years old, he's flirting with your mom.
Yeah. I was like, I think it's in the bag. I'm 5. I think you got this one. So, yeah, my dad was always very funny.
My dad and I don't really get along that well. He's actually a stepdad and was not supportive at all of the career. In fact, at one point, I played ukulele in my act and did very well. Got on television doing it, the whole thing. But I remember the first time I played the ukulele for him, he just looked at me and was like, what the hell do you think you're going to do with that? But I did have, like, so many teachers, especially in, there's a teacher named Mr. Beasley, a psychology teacher, and he was just like, Wayne, you really got something. Like, you're funny in class, you're not disruptive, you're smart, like, you should try this. You should definitely try this. I was like, oh.
So she was always like, yeah, this is never going to happen. You're insane. I don't know what you're doing. Nobody knows what you're doing. My father was pretty low-key about it. My father was like, you happy? Good. My father was a lot fucking smarter about it.
My dad was funny, but not in the way that he thought he was funny. So he would try to tell a joke or tell a joke that he thought was funny, and then he would laugh very loudly at the end of the joke. And everyone around the table would kind of, you'd hear the clink, clink, clink of the cutlery as the joke didn't land. And then you'd think, please, I don't want to catch anyone's eye, because if I do, I'm just going to go.
She came to the show 2 hours early and stood in the lobby and introduced herself to every person who came in. Hi, I'm Blanche Lewis. I'm his mother. Hi, you're coming to see my son. So everyone knew her, and she sat right in the middle of the theater. So I say, so my father, you know, he had 6 penises. I'm just saying something dumb. And she would literally, I don't want to get out of shot. She'd stand up and go, oh, Bill never had 6 penises. How dare you? It was absolutely the oddest show. Because they all went, boo, you know, you're putting your dad down. Well, no, it was a joke before she showed up.
HBO used to do a thing in Bryant Park where you face the library and they would have comics on stage, live, and no censorship during afternoons in the summer. My mother and father happened to be in for that, and the place is packed. And it's spectacular to be able to yell the word fuck and throw it out and have it hit the library and bounce back at you. It's like heaven. And the crowd was great. And we finished up, and my mother goes, "Oh my God, they really do like you."
There's always a bit of judgment. That was funny. Almost like a comic. Like, I know, but you should have laughed. Oh, I was thinking about it, if there was any ways to improve it. I just did Letterman last week. I found no room for improvement. It's always the first thing. However, you can tell David Letterman, if you have a chance, I don't know if he's talkative, that set is too busy. I mean, why are you standing in front of New York City? What is that? There should be a nice curtain that goes with your outfit. Well, you let me get right on that.
By the way, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. That's the frustrating part. He's not wrong.
If you change your mind, you can always go back to Conan, right? I mean, that was literally within the 10 seconds of his first reaction was, when the world beats you to shit, you can come back with your tail between your legs, can't you? And I said, yeah, but that's not really kind of what I'm focused on right now, Dad. Now, one could make the case that he was right. I came crawling back after being chewed up and spit out by this goddamn town.
But I would just like you for once to go, that was great. But there's always a criticism. Okay, so we're not allowed. So should I say something nice first and then I can say something? That'd be nice. That's a start. Let's start there. But then it comes out as Irish sarcastic. Well, your jeans fit great.
Acceptance has been a big part of dealing with who he was. And realizing very early in life that I was far from perfect made it a little bit easier, but not much. And there's a whole nother layer to it. It's like when you're a junior, you're really just a statue built to honor that which walked before you, right? Like, your name is his. You're going to do what he was going to do, and there's not a discussion. And as my grandfather said before he passed away, you're gonna fix what he fucked up. And so whether that's rightful pressure or not, that's pressure. So
how old are you when he says that?
I was 15 years old. 15. He told me he was proud of me. He was sick and he was in hospice care at that point. And he said, "Freddie, did you clean your room today?" I said, "Yeah, Papa, I cleaned my room." He said, "I'm very, very proud of you." So, and you're 15. You don't realize he's saying it for everything, but he's too much of a man to say it, right? I go, yeah, okay, no problem. And he goes, "You know, your father really fucked things up." What? He goes, "And it's your job to fix it." 4 hours later, he was dead. I literally was just like, I gotta get into acting. I saw Neil Patrick Harris that summer getting people excited for acting in my high school, and was like, I gotta do this shit.
98% of kids suffer from, hey, look at me, desperate for attention. Is there a way to explain why any of us actually chooses, hey, look at me as a career? Oh, I'm gonna devote the rest of my life to being the center of attention.
Those early teens where you get to sort of hang out with your father and his friends, you know, occasionally, and just sort of getting a sense of their kind of adult humor and just seeing little glimpses of it. They were still moderating it for the kids, but you could see between the cracks there was something a little bit more edgy there and a little bit naughtier, and the bad language was kept to a minimum, but you know, you could see it was brewing, and that the off-color subjects were in the air. I remember that being very tantalizing, you know, kind of wanting to hang with them, sit in the pub garden, because I wasn't allowed in the pub, but sitting in the pub garden with them and, you know, eating a bag of crisps and kind of excited. And so that excitement of when do I get to be part of that?
And it was this dynamic of the laughter. You'd hear, like, as a kid, I'm just hearing, like, and you'd hear this rumbling laughter, and I was completely taken by it, fascinated. And it was some of these relatives from the past that really got me like, okay, this is something going on here. and it was alcohol. That's what I realized. It was the booze.
I was sitting around the table, and from a very, very young age, I always dominated the conversation. It was the one place that, like, I fucking hung out in. I could hang out forever because people were laughing. And that was, like, every Sunday or every Friday or every time we would have, like, a big meal where everybody was there. For some reason, they would always be laughing at me, and I would be telling stories about... Sometimes it was, like, you know, terrible things, you know, like, I got beat up a lot when I was a kid, and, like, my sister thought it was hilarious, you know. I remember one time, and she was like, oh, my God, how many times did Dominic DePinto kick your ass this week? And I'd be like, it's not funny, all right? And I'd start to cry, and then I'd turn it into a joke, and, like, it would turn into, like, a bit or something.
I don't remember a lot making the family laugh. It's more that I would laugh a lot at the family. Yeah, I would laugh a lot at my uncle's jokes and comedy shows and things like that. And it was the feeling of that made me interested in comedy, I think.
Right. It was quite a while before you consciously made the decision to try to make
a joke.
Yeah.
Yes.
how much later? How old?
My first joke was I was a late joker. My first joke was at 21.
Seriously?
No, I don't know.
Great.
I just like telling stories. I would have my family sit around, and I would be like, guys, I have this story. You have to hear it. And they'd be like, and I would just make up a story as I went along, a horrible story just about, like, fake, like, animals. I'd be like, so this rabbit just was in the forest, and they were just like, we know you're making this up as you go along, and it's not good. And my dad would film it, and then we'd watch it, and I'd be like, oh, my God, this girl's going to make it. So it was definitely, for me personally, because I really don't know about kids on purpose, but for me personally, my narcissism and thinking that I deserved attention was reinforced by my parents.
Every kid makes up knock-knock jokes, but it takes kids a long time to understand it. They'll still try it.
Right.
They'll make up their own rules, and they're funny because they've got the idea wrong.
You know, I actually was a very, very shy kid. And I don't think I was funny until I left home. And so that's what my parents are still surprised. They're like, what is happening? Why are you on Letterman?
There's something about family and that connection. And then to have that secret kind of sense of humor together where the same goofy shit makes you laugh. Like, everyone loves my dad's political stuff and his serious sledgehammer stuff. I love his goofy shit. I love the little moments where he's just got a phrase in between even two bits, and he'll just say a little something about Uncle Fred or something, or Steve or Dave, just a little something, and that's like the humor we shared, was that little stuff. And I do have a memory of, I guess it was like junior high. I think we were at Gelson's. First one's Gelson's first came out, and we decided to do, it just came up, a whole produce section in gibberish. We had an argument over the tomatoes in gibberish. We ended up singing some sort of gibberish folk song together and just improvised and played. And for me, that's like one of my most joyful moments with him.
It's the fun part about being a dad, because there's nothing funnier than a little kid really hitting it right. And so my son, I remember, as he would try to do a joke in the room, when he was like 5, he'd try to do a joke, he'd look at me, he'd go, it didn't land, did it? I'm like, no, it didn't land. It didn't land.
Take your desk, take your chair, sit in the hallway. And I'd sit in the hallway of an elementary school. And people, you know, teachers would walk by and they go, why are you out here? And I go, because I killed in there.
If you were making a movie about somebody who became a stand-up comedian and you put this into it, people would go, it's a little on the nose. The only way I could get attention as the 5th of 6 was to do my bits. And literally, my dad would have his friends over, and I would get out of bed and come down, do Nixon. And I would do it. I was 7, 8 years old.
I mean, there's an old picture of me, you know, wearing Groucho glasses and, you know, holding a bottle of booze. And, you know, they used to have a little bar area in their den, and I'd go back there. I'd try to make... what he used to tell me to do is, like, Because he sold appliances, he was always on the cutting edge of things, and I think he was one of the first guys to have his television in a wall. So the TV in the den was in the wall, and the closet was behind it, so the back of the TV was there. And I would go in the closet, and I would stand behind the TV, and my grandfather would go, "You're on the television! I see you on the television!" He was a very funny fella.
There was a moment when I was little in elementary school when I realized I'm not good at sports, and this is a daily humiliation. They would pick sides. I'd get picked last after the girls, after disabled kids, and it happened every day, twice a day, in gym class and at lunch. And I just remember putting rocks up my nose and pretending I was a slot machine and having people, like, pull my arm down and then opening my nostrils so rocks fell out. That was, I don't think that made me any cooler, but at the time it seemed like a good strategy to distract from the fact that I was not a good soccer goalie.
And then I started doing impressions of people, around the same time, like junior high. And that's the first time I ever thought of myself being funny that way.
Probably around when I was 15, that's when I realized, I'm good at this. I can do this.
I just annoyed people endlessly from then on. It was just way too much fun. And I couldn't understand why people would be upset. I was pretty relentless.
So I could even just pick one person out from the crowd of kids, and I would try to crack that person and make them laugh, I knew if I could make this kid Damien laugh, that everyone would be like, "Oh, yeah, he killed."
But I thought I was a nice kid. In my heart, I looked at myself as a nice, sweet kid. So when a guy would frown or, even seem sad, I'm like, "What's wrong with you, man? This is funny. You're a 12-year-old guy and you have breasts. I mean, come on. What's not funny about that?"
And once you kill, you want to leave the room. You have a great joke. You're like, "Oh, that was great. I gotta get out of here now." It's because that was so funny.
And you were aware of you need to exit after the laugh?
Get out. Because if you stay too long, it's like, "You want me to do that bit again?"
I don't remember how I found this out, but I could make a sound that was essentially a ventriloquism sound that the teacher thought was coming from another place.
Like another student? Or just another place in the room?
Another student or another, yeah. And I don't know to this day, I know conceptually what ventriloquism is, but at the time I just came upon this. And I could make this sound. I'll make the sound. It might be just warning the sound people. Which was, if I can still do this. I don't do this anymore, I should tell you, because... So...
What the hell?
The teacher would do that, and the teacher would throw a kid out, not me. It wasn't really even for attention, because I wasn't getting attention. It was more for, I guess I couldn't come to grips with the idea that they were trying to teach something.
I would go to where they were with an enormous tape recorder from the AV squad, and I would lie and say it was a real radio station. And when I got there, a child, had just shown up, and they would realize they got duped. But they would talk to me anyway, because they were really nice. And I would just say to Seinfeld, "How do you write a joke?" And I would force him to walk me through it. Or I interviewed Harold Ramis. "How do you write a movie?" And those interviews changed my life because they really told me. It was my college. I had my college in junior year of high school. I was just so obsessed. So I thought, I'm going to try to interview every original writer from Saturday Night Live. So I interviewed Al Franken and Tom Davis and...
You can't just call these people up.
Well, what would happen is someone would be nice, like Alan Zweibel. I'd interview him, and then he would take out the phone book and say, "I'm going to hook you up with this person." And he would start giving me all the phone numbers, and I was obsessive. I was always trying to get Andy Kaufman, but I couldn't get him because at the time he was down south wrestling, and I would call his management office, and they would say, "We don't even know where he is. He's off the grid." He was off the grid before there was a grid.
And then I was watching Richard Pryor with my parents on HBO. It was live in concert from Long Beach. And that was when I knew, like, oh, that's what you do with being funny. And I remember being amazed that my parents and I were enjoying the same thing so much. That's the first time I can remember me saying that's what I want to do as far as it related to my family. I mean, as far as my own quirky, weird shit, I mean, I've been a little pervert my whole life. I've had that whole weird addictive personality thing since very, very early childhood. And being funny was just kind of, it was also a way to balance out people picking on you. Nobody fucked with you if you were funny because they were scared you'd mock them. It's the one thing I could do to a football player that he couldn't do to me.
I started doing drugs when I was 15. I started doing drugs heavily. So I went to rehab when I was 16, and I got out of rehab, and like all my friends that I hung out with just ignored me. They never called me anymore. I lost my entire friend base. So my grades were so bad that I took theater to get an easy A. I'm like, it's the easiest A I can take. So I do that, and I do a monologue that was comedic. We would put on plays for the entire school, and it was like super Def Jammy, so like people would like boo and like throw stuff and we did this play that we had written, and I was one of the leads, and I came out and just completely had the entire theater just destroyed, rolling, like just murdered with this character, and like to the point, I mean, people were like lost it, and my teacher was just like, I walked off stage and she was like, there's way more here than you're seeing. She's like, you gotta like, so I joined an improv group and just started like getting into comedy. But it kind of like, comedy took over for what the drugs did for me. I just was so obsessed with drugs, and then that was gone, and so I just completely threw myself into comedy.
You're controlling this whole room. You're giving them, you're like a drug dealer. You're giving them this drug that's making them feel really good all at once.
From the time I was a kid and I got addicted to people looking at me, it's like the reason I want to do that for work is because you get addicted to that feeling. You get addicted to that immediate high. I mean, that's why people become addicted to sex or drugs or alcohol, because it gives you what you want or what you think you want. And with this, it's a healthy way to get love or whatever it is that we call it. But it's a constant, it's like an adrenaline. You know, there's nothing like getting a laugh from people. It's a really weird, addictive high, whether it's on a stage or just it's a weird power thing, which there's no other way for me to achieve that. There's no other way for me to feel that, and nothing else can compare to that. So what kind of job would I do? That I would go to work all day and be miserable, because no job is gonna compare to that feeling. So I think that was why I had to keep doing it, because I'm always chasing that feeling.
How did that feel?
I'm sorry.
When you finally had
crack cocaine.
Yeah.
Rock cocaine.
Because
big rock cocaine. Because when you're alone and you're solo up there, and you can modulate them, and you get the laughs, and you can build on it, you can go back and forth, and the power of like calling back something and having them. It's like you're the one-man show, and the adrenaline and blood shoots through your head in a way that I think is identical to crystal meth.
Yeah.
I would do gigs. I would do a shot at 12:30, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, I still can't figure out why I'm not asleep, because it had just shot through. You know, the adrenaline shoots through you.
I feel like comedy is a drug in a weird way, and I don't know what it's a gateway to, but doing more drugs? It's hour-long specials? Hour-long drugs? What does it lead to? A sitcom of a nightly thing? I mean, it is. It really is, and it's a buzz, and you go, I got to get that again. I mean, you go to another club the same night, because you go, I did this club already.
Yeah.
I did all these drugs here.
That's old.
So now let's go to another place where there's more drugs.
That's old porn.
That's old porn. Yeah, that's old porn. I want to go to a place. I need some fresh.
It is a drug, you know. And the closest thing, when you have a moment of either hilarity or vulnerability on stage, or something where it's the closest thing I've ever come to, even an acting class of spirituality, where you kind of like anything, and I hate that I'm even saying that word, but like of any kind of like.
But it's that powerful.
It is that powerful. It's the closest thing I've had to, you know, like people speaking in tongues or whatever, and having the enlightened feeling. When you have a moment on stage or in film where but especially on stage, yeah, where you're in front of a live audience, where you're.
It's only happening in that moment.
Yeah, and it's like bang, and it's a feeling of enlightenment, feeling of freedom, liberty, yeah.
It took a big chunk of time for me to discover it, to discover that silence is the root of all comedy, that's where it lays, because all silence did was panic me. So if there was silence, it meant they weren't laughing or they were contemplating how to kill me.
I don't think there's any bigger thrill in comedy than when knowing a big laugh's coming up and they don't know. When you've got that little secret where you're like, in a second, you're going to be laughing. And maybe they're uncomfortable, or maybe not. I have a routine where I took a friend of mine with muscular dystrophy to a brothel, and there's this moment just before the woman sucks the disabled guy off on stage where they're all going, this is horrible, and I have a punchline that's going to zing. And that for me, silence is... sometimes when you watch... Do you ever watch, like, movies being made and you can tell the editing when you can tell jokes where you go, that joke worked, but you cut it off too quick. And someone who was editing it went, well, that joke's over, boom.
You can gauge you know when the laughter is going to come. You get that response built in so that when you're in the vacuum of an audience, you know, you understand timing, you understand the fundamentals.
Comedians, you know, you have certain laugh ears. You can hear. That's where you're listening to the audience, and that's where some, you know, new comedians that, you know, they bomb and they come off stage and they're like, that was pretty good. And you're like, you know, they have no laugh ears, right? I just have the approach of never give them a second. Never give them a second to, it's like someone's off balance. That's the best time to hit someone, right? They're like, that's kind of, we all have friends where you sit there and you talk to them and you know they're just thinking of what they're going to say. They're not even listening. That's what comedians do.
You know, you walk off stage and you're at the bar and you're not in magic anymore. And then it's almost like when I would walk off, like the spell is broken. And I realize I'm a fucking zilch, and then they realize it again, like, oh, God, we allowed him to control us?
We got involved in a dangerous situation, you know, doing drugs and then just constantly working and not dealing with it. And the one thing about Mitch is weird is a lot of people view comics as, especially someone that, you know, dies tragically like Mitch did. And, you know, drugs, it comes with all these thoughts. And a lot of people think it's something about Mitch is he didn't really have that kind of negative side. In a fucked up way, it was almost his downfall. Right. Like, I would say, Mitch, we can't do this anymore. Mitch wasn't stupid. It wasn't fun anymore. Doing an opiate isn't fun after it isn't fun anymore. Right.
Who's the pumpkin chick, Cinderella, whichever one to turn into a pumpkin. Like, that's what it's like. Yeah, I'm a fucking zilch again. Ugh. I would come off stage in Hartford, Connecticut, or whatever shithole I had done, you know, and I was just drinking my water, and I'm still the same frightened idiot. And I'm like, I have to go back on to achieve that.
Definitely a certain point in my life where I was at ease most on stage in front of strangers, as opposed to being with anyone I knew. I would just not that I was antisocial, I don't know, but I looked forward to getting on stage. I was like, that's where I really can be loose and have fun, and you know, I just love doing that. I mean, now I have a talk show where I just talk to strangers, people I haven't met.
A healthy person probably looks around and says, it's a wonderful world full of wonderful things. And a non-healthy person says, I want people to think I'm one of the wonderful things. I want people to be glad that I live on Earth. I need to hear it. Rather than just think, oh, isn't it wonderful to have people like that who exist to entertain me? You go to a place of, how do I become that person? That someone else will feel that way about me, you know? That's what I guess separates healthy people from non-healthy people.
There's a protective element, I think, that we all kind of share with one another because no one knows but us what we go through. The insecurity and the childishness, the gaping hole that can only be filled with the love of strangers, laughter every 15 to 30 seconds, that is something that unless you do it, you don't know. No manager knows it, even if they're a real astute, empathetic manager, and there are such people. No agent knows it. I do this every night. Every night. 300, I work, 250, 300 nights a year. And so don't tell me.
It's failure.
Yeah.
I think it's failure is what it is. And the whole thing, all these 27 years of me doing stand-up have been a fluke. And today's the day that they all figure it out and you walk out there and it's the first time you've ever, and you're never funny again.
Well, I think everyone can be funny, but not when they want. That's sort of the trick. Sometimes when people want to be funny and they try, and it's a little painful. But
the fact that they can try, that's the thing that, to me, that dilutes it, because at a party, nobody dabbles in dentistry. But everyone can, if they want, choose to dabble in comedy. They can be horrible,
right?
But they can at least do it.
That's true.
That annoys the hell
true.
out of me.
Well, I think everyone's capable of being funny at some point or another, I think, and I think every actor is capable of being funny. I really do.
The first person from my real life that made me laugh really hard, Dan Rather, I guess, is the first guy who really made me sort of have that I think I'm going to throw up laugh when he switched from suits to sweaters.
When I did stand-up, I always thought, I'm just some fucking idiot. Why would you sit and listen to me talk for 20 minutes? I didn't have that confidence that I could do some great George Carlin monologue that would inspire people. And it took me another decade to feel that in my movies I could open up my heart and tell people what I felt about being alive, and that it was worthy of being told. And the moment I realized that I can open up and that it is okay to share my way of looking at the world with other people, then my career took off.
I got to see Richard Jeni.
I always loved Peter Sellers.
An early Peter Sellers.
Or even Phyllis Diller. Like, those kind of threw me more than
Stephen Wright,
who gets on and is so quiet and withdrawn.
Dennis Miller's second special, Black and White.
Bill Cosby and whatnot. And watching that master, watching Johnny Carson and seeing
the Woody Allen movies, and then the Steve Martin specials.
Steve Martin, I wanted to be
the greatest stand-up with the most weapons in history.
Because I thought then I could be the right kind of Lenny Bruce funny.
And that's something that Adam Sandler, really ingrained in me.
I saw Spencer and went, who are these guys? How come they're, making fun of us in a way that's really accurate? And when I was doing Alan Partridge, there's a bit in it where I steal from Michael McKean. There's a scene where I say something like, who do you think you are? And what I'm seeing is, there's a scene where Michael McKean, when Christopher Guest comes in, says, I've come to replug your life support machine. I've come to, we can do a tour of Japan. Our single, Sex Farm, is a big hit in Japan. And he goes, oh, so you've come to replug our life support systems. I mean, the fucking nerve that you display. and I use that sometimes.
When we first started making The Office, I was walking down the street with Ricky Gervais, and Steve Coogan was coming the other way, and I was very excited and but slightly daunted, and I have this weird thing when I meet people I admire that I don't want to seem like a fawning idiot, I want to seem I don't want to give them, I just could be effusive and talk about how great they are. I feel like that just will seem vulgar or kind of ass-kissy or something, And so I have this thing which is to sort of be slightly a little bit cheeky, we're comedians, and, I'll have a little dig at you and you have a little dig at me, but it's all done with good humour. And Coogan comes out and he introduces himself to both of us, and he's very sweet, and he says, I've seen your show, The Office, and I'm a big fan. And he said, if my career's ever on the skids, I'd love you to write something for me. And my mouth, I just went, well, you better get in touch now then. But for no reason, his career was going from strength to strength. It was just, what? And he sort of went, and he sort of was, and Ricky was just looked at me like, that's a weird, and I would, obviously you don't, your career's going so good that you don't, it's ironic, I'm saying it was absurd, you don't need to get in touch, and he went, right, and they kind of tried to have a conversation for a little while, And then he went, sorry, what did you mean? I went, I'm sorry, what I meant was, your career is clearly great, so you don't need to get in touch with us. But why would you say that? No, but yeah. And it just fizzled out, you know. And we just went off into the day. And I've never really been able to, had the opportunity to sort of explain myself or apologise to him. Because you just thought, what a dick.
I'd like to be able to try and make a point and then still be able to tell a joke about fucking getting shit on your dick or whatever, right? And I love that Carlin could say something so precise and so well, and then now I'm going to talk about farts for 5 minutes. He had the same hard line when it came to farting, which I don't know if that makes sense, but as I said, I only became a huge fan of Carlin when I realised how hard it was to be really good at this.
Groucho. Not so many people talk Zeppo or Chico, but I loved Harpo. Because Harpo to me was insane, and there was an unpredictable nature. He'd just, be cross-examined to the passport guy, and he'd just jump on the thing and start, doing the pens like it was a plane, and then start chasing women. I thought this guy, because I don't know, literally, there's no way I can look away for 5 seconds because I'll miss some transition.
Lenny Bruce decides that kind of philosophical, honest speech is going to be called stand-up comedy. And right from that moment, you've created Pryor and Carlin. We don't know who they're going to be, but they have to happen.
I remember seeing Richard Pryor on an Ed Sullivan show.
Yep.
In which the routine was about the toughest kid in school. And for no reason at all, the toughest kid in school would point at and say, you, after school, I'm going to bite your foot off. And you'd have to believe him because he'd be walking around with a big shoe hanging out of his mouth. I mean, that was his routine for Ed Sullivan show.
Yeah.
The actual routine was you, after school, I'm going to bite your dick off. And you had to believe him because he walked around with a dick hanging. I mean, it was pretty fun when you realize that.
I mean, my favorite is Richard going to Africa and sitting in the coach with the African guy. And he says, the man's smelling. He does this thing, and it was like, and this whole, and it was like, oh, I'm watching the smell. I can see it. But then he says, and then I looked at him, and he was like, ooh, you stink too. And I thought, oh, okay. And I understood.
Richie Pryor, who had a big acting career, did his greatest acting in his stand-up, where he would break your heart and involve you in story. I mean, and you can see it in his concert films. It's extraordinary, realistic acting. And with movies, he just didn't give it that kind of dimension that he did to his stand-up.
Richard was in love with Pam Grier, okay? Like every guy was in the 70s. And he got his hands on an old tape of some of my dad's stuff that wasn't so funny, that wasn't that good. They sit down and Richard says, oh, I got some stuff. Y'all gotta hear this. This is some great shit. And he starts playing some of my dad's old material. And my dad's getting hot, right? He's kind of shitting all over him. My dad finally just says, fuck this. And he gets up and he lays out Richard, takes both girls and splits. Now, I'm not lying. I didn't make this story. This story was told to me by Growing Pains, by Joanna Kearns, man. Like, I'm sitting in the trailer, and about right near the end of the story, I think she realizes, oh shit, he was married and this is his son, and goes into this reserved kind of, but he was a very sweet man.
The news came on and they said that Freddie Prinze had just killed himself. A comic could make so much of make a big splash in this world, and so many people are affected by somebody who makes them laugh. It's an important job. And for some reason, his passing was the thing that sent me out to L.A.
I was in Rochester, New York. I was an absolutely nobody, part-timer, just jack of all trades, would do whatever the radio station asked of me. And one day, Sam Kinison walked in. The mic went on, and he just spoke his mind. He was outrageous. He was funny. He was sensitive at times. And a light bulb went off in my head where I realized, oh, my God, I could do this different. Just, you got to just be yourself. And just, I started blowing off everything I knew about radio after that day.
I think the only vision I had of it, and many people I
I believe, say this, is of the Dick Van Dyke Show and the writer's room of Buddy and Sally and Rob Petrie thinking of ideas.
I used to sit home and I used to watch it, and I look at this guy, Rob Petrie, and, you know, he was married to Mary Tyler Moore. He had a very nice house up in New Rochelle. He had a kid named Richie, and he spent his days at work lying on a couch just, you know, joking around with Buddy and Sally, and I went, I think I want to do that.
I feel like that I had a vision of, oh, I'll write. Somehow I'll get in an office. But I think it was more, I just want to be around people who do comedy or say funny things. As I got older, when Letterman came on in high school, then I had an idea. I would like to write for the Letterman show and live in New York. But it's not like I had a talent for it. Or, you know what I mean? Like, excuse me, I have tuberculosis. I don't think it's contagious. Kevin Pollak, who is not sitting here with me. Kevin Pollak.
I think it is.
No, it might be.
Contagious.
I might have to take the waters.
It took me 3 years to get on stage for the first time. And the reason why I finally got on stage was that there was a contest. It's always a contest. So the prize was a check for $200 and the opportunity to perform at the DC Improv.
The thing that I worried about when I first started doing stand-up was whether or not I was crazy enough to be a comedian, you know, because I didn't really understand what being a stand-up... I mean, I was doing sets in comedy clubs for almost a year before I realized there's guys that you haven't even heard of who don't have a day job, who are just doing comedy clubs. You know, I didn't know that that was a thing that could happen. I thought, I'm going to the club where Robin Williams started, and someone's going to see me like they saw him, and then I'm going to be in a TV show. That's what I thought was going to happen.
And I said to the club manager, I said, I want to do this again. When can I do it? And they handed me a mop, and they said, well, there's no spots available, but if you run food to tables and sell tickets and things like that, then we'll keep you in mind for fallouts and cancellations. And so I kicked around the DC Improv for about 3 or 4 years. And eventually I was opening for people like Brian Regan and Jake Johansson and Mitch Hedberg and these incredible comics who taught me everything about comedy. It's about immersion. It's about living. Like when I worked at the DC Improv, I was there all the time. I was there the nights I worked. I was there the nights I didn't work. I went to every show. I saw comedians who were nothing like me. I saw Larry the Cable Guy and Rodney Carrington, people who you think you have nothing in common with, but really, comedians have everything in common.
Cab driver, paralegal, private chauffeur, you know, stuff like that. And I'm lost. I'm a lost soul, you know.
In New York?
Yes, a lost soul. Parents beside themselves.
What are we going to do?
Yes.
Went to university.
I would overhear conversations that were heartbreaking, you know, terrible.
About you?
Yeah, about me, yeah. Oh, you know, what are we going to do?
What's he going to do with himself?
They send me to a psychiatrist,
sure.
You know, and so I take the subway to Brooklyn to the psychiatrist, and, you know, what do you go, what is it? You can't do anything for me.
No.
So then I don't know how or why I thought of this, but I decided to take an acting class.
When I saw Bob Odenkirk and David Cross for the first time, I was like, oh, they're doing what I could do. That's my sense of humor, and they're making a living at it. Maybe I could do this. I always assumed no one, because I grew up as a terrible nerd who was considered to be ugly and undateable. So,
Chapter 1.
So I used humor, but when you are ugly and undateable, the thing that people say to you when you're trying to be funny is, stop trying to be funny. You're not funny. At 25, I saw other comedians doing the stuff that I thought I was funny at, so I did it, and within a week of performing comedy for the first time, I now was a comedian. And I told people I'm a comedian, and people went, oh, that's why you act the way you act. Oh, you're funny.
We do come from the misfit island of toys, so we should be kind of weird looking. I try and communicate that to my children. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with being weird. You know, it's a very strange, because I wish someone would have told me that, because I feel like that's something culturally that we kind of toss around, but really being different is good.
So I guess, yeah, and I know this has been talked about before, and it's a lot more open in society. I know Jonathan Winters talked about it in the 60s, but being in a psych ward, like, that was just, to talk about that, like, that was like a really, I felt very ashamed of that. And then to now, you know, in stand-up, you say it the first time, and it's like, your voice is kind of, you know. Yeah. And then, like, 10 times in, it's like, so you're in the psych ward, as you do, and, you know, you get so much more relaxed about it. And then finally, it's like, you can talk about it with anybody.
Yeah.
And that has been a real gift to me, that the art form allows, is like, you can talk about anything.
I'd like to go on. On a Saturday night? On a Saturday night. He said, who are you? I said, I'm in the audience. He said, have you ever done comedy before? I said, no. He said, no, you can't go on. He said, you have to audition, you know. Yeah.
I don't think I got into it because I was essentially narcissistic, or even that I was looking for love. Like, I feel like I got into stand-up because, you know, I needed to be seen. And I thought that, like, that stage, I can do whatever I want. Whatever I want. The only context is you should get laughs. Should. That's even conditional, depending on how much you're being paid. And if you're not being paid at all, you can do whatever you want. You can yell, you can spit, you can tell people to fuck themselves. It's great. You can do that publicly, you know, in front of you. But I think that, like, for me, it was just a matter of, like, you know, I felt that I had something to say, and I thought that comedy, for me, when I watched it when I was a kid, I was like, these guys have a handle on things. They can take life and just, you know, turn a few phrases, and, like, they got a handle on it, and they, you know, you learn things, you see things in a different way, and they seem to be, you know, in control of this horrendous, you know, hurricane of bullshit that comes at us every day. And I think that's what appealed to me, is like, how can I get a voice that somehow can manage life and be seen, kind of like I exist and I have things to say.
It's easily the single craziest thing that I have ever done in my life was going up to Bud, asking him to go on. Thank God he said no.
You have to nourish a delusion, you know, to sort of, you know, make your way. To keep pushing in show business. You really have to nourish a delusion. And what's frightening, I think, sometimes is that, you know, people don't know when to stop. You know what I mean? It's like...
comedy intervention.
Yeah, but does that really exist? And how can you break somebody's heart? You know, their heart's going to break on their own, or it's not.
Here's the evolution of it, I think, is first, I want you to like me. Then I want you to tell me that I'm normal. And then, listen, can I tell you guys about this thing that happened to me? And the relief of, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. That's happened to me too. And I think the older you get, the more mature you become, the more you really feel that connection. Even if they're just sitting there in silence during the setup, you really feel that we are just talking here and we understand each other. And it's not so much about me being understood. It's about we understand each other.
This is a horrible thing, but my dog died from a thing that I did. Like, I removed a ramp from the backyard to the front yard, and I forgot to put it back, and she extreme sports did 3.5 feet to her death. And I felt terrible about that, and I do a whole shtick about it. But the great thing is like, after shows, people will be like, I sat on my rabbit! Like, you know, like, I squeezed my hamster too hard. I thought I was hugging it. Oh, yeah, okay, right. Like...
You become a safe haven.
Yeah. Like, just... like, it doesn't become this private, horrible thing.
And it took me years to really understand that's what you're doing. You have the desire to control an audience, or is it the desire to connect? Is it a desire to say, hey, we're all together, I'm part of you, I got in there, we have a recognition, we know each other. And thereby, I go, okay, I do know who I am.
There's two kinds of laughs. There's the kind of laugh you get when you You do a good gag and do it well, and the audience laugh. And then there's the other gag, the other kind of joke you do where you say something which reveals a truth about the way men behave or the way women behave or something that everyone in the room acknowledges as true, all at the same time. And they laugh. And their laugh is a laugh of recognition. And that kind of laugh comes from the gut, because they're laughing because they go, you just shone a light on what it is to be human.
You could, walk into a note session and you could threaten to walk off a movie if you change one frame of that gag, because I am sure that this works and I will not change it. It ruins the character. If you don't understand what movie we're making, this is something that's important to me, and I will go to the mat on this one. You show it to an audience. If it doesn't get a laugh, you're back in the editor room. Okay, let's blow this thing up. What do we do here? Let's recut it. Anybody have any ideas?
And that's, I guess, our greatest success is creating that image in their brain, if it's a story piece, and they can see it, hear it, taste it, smell it, and then boom, the fireworks go off.
Every comedian will tell you the most entertaining show to watch is your good friend who you know is really funny. On stage, struggling.
Bombing so hard, but I had to keep doing the impression. And I'm talking like Cliff Clay, like, the actual fact, and I was looking, Jon Stewart was in the crowd, and he was going, he was going, like...
There's a show where I've never bombed so badly in my life.
I went on, and I fucking tanked.
I was a Saturday night. I did 2 shows, and the audience stared at me, and it was a living hell.
It was a nightmare, and I bombed.
Never forget, it's the only time I've ever bailed on my time.
Everyone bombs. And again, what might be a bomb today might be considered grand art 10 years from now.
I find stand-up really tough, because if it's not great, I find it, the actor in me just wants to die. I have to leave the theater. If they're dying, I'm dying worse. I so vicariously suffer with them. But when they're good at it, it's a mystery to me. I don't get how they do it. I wouldn't do stand-up with a gun to my head.
What goes through your mind when you just hear crickets in the audiences?
Failing on stage as a stand-up is a quick descent into, they hate me, my life has no value, I'm alone, I'll never be funny again. My father watched me get no laughs on my second, like none. And I got to stage 17, and I went to the bathroom, had a little cry, and then I got in the car with my dad, and my dad said, he goes, I don't think this is for you, mate. This is not a bad little hobby, and, if it means anything, I think you're funny, like that. He was very supportive, but he told me to quit it, and I did. I did one more go, and it went average, and I thought, well, this is it. It's not for me.
The one thing I think is a common denominator of all comedians, and that is a bond, is that in order to become a comic, pay attention, you have to love watching yourself die. You have to, because when you're learning it, you're bombing it a lot. There's more than crickets, there's hate. There's like sharks, and you're bleeding, and they're nipping, and one of the great lines ever yelled at me, why don't you go home and gargle with razor blades? Which crippled me. I laughed so fucking hard, I said, I'm done, you win. That's so good, I'm gonna use it.
Probably maybe the first or second time I ever bombed. I don't know why, but my fight or flight instinct kicked in, and evidently it was flight. I was supposed to do 7 minutes, and I got up there, and I'd already told the host what my closer was, and I got up there, and I did probably 3 minutes of my act to silence. And then I was like, well, I have 4 minutes left, and I'm not going to spend it in 4 more minutes of silence. So I just immediately jumped to my closer, which probably took about 35 seconds. And I did my closing bit and went, all right, thanks. A total time on stage was probably 4 minutes, if that. And then one of the other comics went, yeah, I know it sucks to eat shit, but you can't do that. I was like, oh, really? I can't just bail if it's not going well? No.
This did happen recently, semi-recently, Spinal Tap, based on this movie I did with Rob Reiner, Harry Shearer, Michael McKean. We have played live
for the last 30 years. And we were doing a show in Canada. That's because at that point you're going to cut to a maple leaf. We did a live performance, and it was nothing. I mean, zero. There was no recognition. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Spinal Tap. Singing, playing, Big Bottom.
Jesus.
And then we said, that thing. And it truly was something I've never experienced before or since.
The award before me is won by Raul Julia, a brilliant, wonderful actor who had died that year. And the widow Julia comes up to take the award and accept it. And it was an amazing speech. But, I mean, people are weeping. And I'm backstage and I go, for fuck's sake, I keep having to do this shit following dead people. Well, the crew backstage is, oh, that's so funny. You gotta say that. You gotta say that. I went, now, having no experience with this, I go, really? Should I do this? Is like the band said, hey, that's a great joke. You should tell it on stage. So on live television, I decide to go off script. And I come out and I go, the hell is it? On the Emmy Awards, I followed dead Jessica Tandy, and now I follow another dead guy. I mean, the boos and the hisses and the hostility. And I have never produced sweat like that in my life. It was like Albert Brooks in broadcast news.
So I go to close up, and same deal. I say, well, I'm going to tell you one more thing, then go. Some guy yells out, don't even tell us that, just go. And another sailor, it's a naval base, another sailor stands up and says, leave him alone, I think he's pretty funny. And looks around, nobody's on his side, and he goes, not that fucking funny. Sits down. I do my closing joke to silence, and I say, well, that's it for me. If you see a dick, suck it. And I run off the stage, and the woman has my check in one hand and my jacket in the other, and she says, get out of here. They will kill you. So they literally are chasing. I'm running to my car, and they're chasing me, and it's almost like a horror movie where they never get closer than 15 feet. Like consistently, they're like that. And I get to my car, and there's always that scene in the movie where the guy tries to open up the door, and you think it's bullshit. It's not. I all of a sudden don't know how to use a key, and I'm panicking, and I'm trying to get in my car.
And to look at it objectively as an adult, to be in a bar, in a spotlight, with a stick that makes your voice louder, like to just demand that attention and to not pay it off and to have the people hate you. I mean, that is a really naked, creepy kind of torment to put yourself through.
If I'm on stage and it's not going as well as I'd hoped, perhaps in the past I might have sped up. And now I have a little trick. I just slow right down. Yeah. And I smile a bit. And you're just tricking, and you think, my God, I thought he was doing badly, but look how relaxed he is. It must be me. I must be misreading this. This guy's actually very good.
I was up for this pilot for a reality show, and I was doing it with Adam Sandler, Adam Sandler, and I think Rob Schneider or David Spade. And it was going to be guys traveling across America with video cameras, and we were all unknowns, and Jim Henson was a producer. So we went out and we filmed our own audition ourselves. And then they called me and they said, Jim Henson would like to buy your ideas. He liked a lot of your ideas, but he doesn't think you should be on camera because he thinks you lack warmth. And I thought, this is a guy who taught me how to read. This is Kermit the Frog. This is Sesame Street. This is the warmest man in the world telling me I lack warmth. So I think all of these things made me think, oh, maybe I just should not be on screen. Jim Henson hates me.
If I couldn't do stand-up, I am out of luck.
That power of like
writing a joke and going up that day and not having to worry about anybody else chiming in.
Only two things I wanted in life. One was to be from New York City, and the other was to be Jewish. But then, you know, I learned to juggle, and all hopes of being taken seriously go away.
Or Jewish.
Yes. All hopes of being Jewish go away.
It does feel really good to have felt like there was just something a little bit weird about you your whole life. And why do I want to make people laugh, but then I want to disappear also? And then you meet all these other people that are just like you, and they liked the shows that you liked when you were a kid, and people thought they were mean, and people thought they were weird, and you're all weird together. And they become like your family. But then it makes you retract from normal people. We speak the same language, and I never really feel as comfortable as I feel with comedians, with anyone else. And then bringing a guy around comedians, like, this is Joe, and they're all like, okay. And I'm like, oh, you're right.
How much of it is an enjoyment of making the other two laugh?
Oh, it's the best. Well, this is where I'm a little more different than these two. There are guys that Jimmy doesn't like us talking to on the radio, and I can't wait for them to call in, hit that phone knowing it's going to drive him nuts. Or, you know, back in the old days, more than now, I would really push people's buttons to the point these two would get so uncomfortable. And you would think that would be my cue to back off, but now I'm like, oh, they're uncomfortable? Let me see how far I could take this. And I've had these guys, like, walk out of the studio, walk behind equipment, completely horrified, embarrassed. It really is uncanny how uncomfortable he can make me with talking to certain guests. It was funny, and I look back on it, and there's some of my favorite moments. And it's like, but I don't have the ability to do that. Like, I would just go, no, I'm just kidding. Like, I would have to fucking, you know, emotionally whore it out and ruin it.
I've always been self-centered. I think you have to be self-centered in order to do this kind of thing a little bit. So much of comedy is confidence and believing, you know, faking it till you make it, I think. When I was doing The State, I was among 11 friends, 10 of them guys, on MTV doing this show in our early 20s. And it was a dream for us because we had the keys to the kingdom. We got to make our own TV show as just out of college. It was crazy. But among the group, the 11 of us, it was very competitive and very painful at times.
March of 1977. And Paul Schaefer was in town in L.A., and Nancy and I were staying with a friend of ours, and my girlfriend, Nancy, later to be my wife, and Paul was in town, and he was going to have dinner with Billy Murray, who just, you know, started that year on Saturday Night Live. And Nancy and I were walking along Santa Monica Boulevard. We're going to go to the Sunset Marquis Hotel, and I just said to her, I can't walk anymore. What do you mean? Are you having a stroke? I said, no, I gotta sit down. So we sat on the bench. She said, what's wrong? I can't go and have dinner with Paul and Billy and pretend to be happy for everyone's success because I am floating and I don't know what to do. How long do we sit here? I don't know. Maybe the night. So later on, whenever we would pass it, we'd call it, oh, there's Breakdown Corner. Remember Breakdown Corner?
We had a conversation once where, you know, you were trying to do a TV show, and I was saying, all we're trying to do is get movies. And it's this sort of not happy with the room you're in, no matter what the room is. So we're on this gigantic television show, and all of us are just thinking, well, on hiatus, we got to get a movie because we want to be a movie star, because we should be movie stars. That, thankfully, has completely changed, and now I love vacations and love having downtime to a certain extent, but there is still that part of me that, you know, wants to be working.
My dad was very protective of me. Another way in which he protected me was actually say to me, I really would not forbid you, but really, really encourage you to stay away from stand-up comedy because it's a ruthless world. And it's a tough life, as I knew as a kid. And then the club circuit, very different than what he did, an even tougher life. And I think he really wanted to protect me from that moment when some heckler shouted out, "Where's the funny Carlin?"
The theory of comedians are veterans of a shared combat experience, not foxhole buddies, more like snipers who've...
Did you write that?
Yes, with similar
Okay.
stories of kills and misses.
Ah, that's fantastic.
There's only so many bell towers.
Yeah, no kidding. I brought my lunch. I can be up here all night. I have a box of dynamite, too, in case it gets out of hand. I think there is a fraternity of comedians. That's how I look at it. Men and women, other than one or two people that you detest beyond all measure, we all get along with each other. And when you're working together, you're on their side. I've been in many shows where even people I didn't like very much, the crowd will have a go at them, and I would go on after and fucking mop up on behalf of them. I've done it before. I remember a time in L.A., I won't say who the comic was, but he didn't do very well, and the crowd was on his dick. And I came up after and went, "You people are fucking morons. That guy's a genius. And don't ever, ever do that in my presence again," you know? And then I've had crowds be racist when you're with the black comic, to the black comic, and then I'll get up and go, "You're making a mistake. You think that because I'm white, I'm on your side. I'm on his side because we're friends, and I hate you."
One time I masturbated in a church.
We'll take that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I was, you know, a teenager. It was almost a socio-religious experiment. I'm going to do this, and I wonder if anything bad's going to happen, or I wonder if this is okay, or if this is just natural. And then I did it, and nothing really happened. I was like, well, I guess I can check that off the list. I've not done that since then. It was really just the one time.
Was it during confession?
I didn't masturbate in front of the altar. No, if I had done that, I would have been a serial killer. As I was shaving my whole body. Masturbating in front of that didn't happen. It was, you know, look. I masturbated in a church in the best way that you could have, which was quietly in the bathroom, like it wasn't out in public.
Well, I think it's important you clarify, because a lot of us had you in the pews.
I was not in the pews. I was going pew, 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 pew.
I always find it fascinating, even now, but when I was back just doing stand-up, that if you go to parties, comedians end up together. They flock. They flock together, and like you could be at party, you could be at the biggest, craziest, you know, Oprah's, whatever party, you can be at and all the comedians end up in the same table or in the same corner.
And then we get together and talk about the hits and misses.
The hits and misses, that's exactly what it is. You get together and you want to hear road stories, and you want to hear like, "Oh, no, I know that booker. Oh, yeah. Or I opened for that person. Oh, they're the worst," or whatever it is. It's just fascinating. Or you can go like, "Who is that comedian that did remember they did the bit with there was like a midget and and you go, "Oh, I know who that was," and you just say the person's name. It's like, oh, thank God you were here, because no one else would get you.
By the time I got to be 15, the juggling of the show was shrinking, and I was talking more and more.
And then I realized, though, after that all the jokes these comics were handing back to me were about me. And I went, wait a minute, you don't have to be a hen could figure this shit out. I have to talk about myself.
Let's talk about anything but this routine. I don't want to do it. I don't want to say it. I know it's going to work. I don't care. It's worked 1,000 times. I don't give a shit. I hate you for laughing, you sheep, you lemmings.
For 40 years, I've been punching out of a paper bag to find out what I'm allowed to say and not allowed to say. So take your pants off and don't move is kind of the theme of my comedy.
The first thing you learn is how to avoid pain and the ultimate failure, which is death.
You'll never be done. They'll just make you finish one day.
And I was in Buffalo, and I was in the middle of it. It wasn't a packed house, but I was in the middle of a joke, and I'm like, I can't do it. I'm tired of myself. I'm saying this out loud. I'm like, I don't know what we're going to fucking do, but I can't do this. And they're all sitting there like, you're in charge, and they're just looking at people like, right.
Is this part of the act?
Yeah, right. And I'm like, but weirdly, my fans are like, all right, Maron's just going to let him find it. He's struggling, but he does just sometimes. At some level, if they are my fans, like it happens. I know him. So I sat up there for like 45 seconds, just sort of like, oh shit, like in that silence. And there's nothing more there's no more present than that. Where you're like, they have expectations, you're not filling them, and you're alone on stage, and they're watching you sit there like, and I'm like, oh God damn it.
Nobody wants my advice. No comedians want my advice. But if I was going to give advice to people, my advice would be, if you say something funny in the moment, you better write it down. Stop editing yourself. Oh, that won't work on stage, or that was too funny, or I am proud of myself that I write almost every single thing down. Funny, unfunny, laundry lists.
I heard a thump, and I looked to the side of the stage, and somebody threw their prosthetic leg on stage with a shoe on it, a hiking boot, and a sock. It was kind of rubber. And the crowd was just as astonished as I was. And I said, who threw the leg up here? And nobody would answer. And I think if you're just starting out as a comic, it might throw you. But because I've been doing it so long, and I'm looking for something like that, we had a lot of fun with it. You know, I put it up on the stool. We were doing a forensic research on it. Well, you know, from the from the texture of the rubber, it doesn't look like this person works out much. It looks like a male Caucasian leg, about 5'8", about 200 plus pounds. And, you know, the audience was loving it. You know, sir, whose is this? Hop up here and get it.
Houston Laugh Stop. It was one of the craziest ever. It just chaos. Like, literally, people beat each other up. Just customers beat the shit out of each other. I was like, wow. I'm ordering beers on stage. No one cares. Just a free-for-all. So after that, I have no plans. Once people start beating each other up, I'm now just another customer.
You know, you can be on stage doing your stand-up routine. Because you've done it 50 times already, your mind can slightly wander, even as you're saying your act. You're doing your act, the audience is responding, but your mind is actually thinking about other things. You can consciously be in two places at once. You can hear your mouth moving, but you can be thinking, where are we going to eat after this? It's a very bizarre thing. And I remember once being on stage, and I just was very aware of the absurdity of the whole situation. Like, not just the fact that I was sitting in front of a room talking, which was weird when you step above it. That seems weird. And that your job is to make them laugh, like a jester. That was weird. But also that it was the pointlessness of it all. And I remember sort of feeling, and then kind of coming back again, back into that moment, and like, oh, well, there's nothing else to do. This is as good a thing to be doing at this moment as anything else.
Should I share my life with somebody? Was I a good enough husband? Can I actually coexist with another human being? Do I tell people that I love them enough? Have I told my parents enough that I love them? Am I honest enough with the people in my life? Am I grateful enough for how lucky I've been? These are the questions that nag at me when I'm in the car, when I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm up from 4 to 6 a.m., and this is the stuff that I end up making movies about. And I think this is the stuff that we end up all writing comedy, writing books, making movies, painting paintings. This is the stuff that finds its way into the work. And if you're not working on that stuff, then you're not really working on anything.
I've carried for so many years a chip on my shoulder from my childhood or my working class background that, you know, that when I meet a kid who grew up with cash and he's a comic or something, I'm very dismissive of them. I'm like, you don't fucking know. What do you got to talk about? And now I'm bringing up one, and it's like, I guess all you do is you don't give them anything, and you make them have jobs, you make them buy their own car, and there's things that I can do that my parents made me do through necessity that I can just do to be a dick. But there's things that I'm not willing to do. I'm not willing to take him on shitty holidays. And that was a lot of my memories, is sitting in a caravan park with my parents, because I don't want to have shitty fucking holidays. I want the coconut on the island. So that means that little cunt's going to be sitting there with a coconut too, being weighted on hand and foot. So how do I stop him from being a fuckwit? And then if he wants to be a comic, I think about that as well. Like, people go, you think you want to be a comic? I go, why the fuck would he want to be a comic? It's like, I was watching some talent show, America's Got Talent, and they had a family of people that were on unicycles spinning basketballs. And they had 8 kids or 12 kids or something. There was a lot of kids, and all the kids were spinning basketballs riding unicycles. And I just think, that's got to be one person's passion in that whole group. It can't be that much of a coincidence. It can't be that much of a coincidence that the whole family's gone, you know what, that's what I'm into as well. Unicycle basketball spinning. And it's also to be spinning a basketball when you're 19 and your sister's 3. And it's like, come and practice with your sister on the unicycle. And you're like, oh, I don't want to. You know, I don't care how religious you are, that you have so many kids and you want to have a family that sticks together. But I think, I know you didn't ask me about parenting, but I think about it a lot at the moment. I think parenting is getting them so they don't need you.
Stand on your own.
Yeah, I think it's getting, and then hopefully they love you and want to visit you occasionally.
I feel that there's safety in accomplishing something and being in the middle of a task.
Safety.
Yeah, the safety is in the doing. You know, for a long time I thought if something succeeds, that'll make me feel better. And having had certain things succeed, I've had certain things fail, but I've had things succeed to the point where you think, well, that's the moment where happiness will happen. You know, the movie did well or people liked it. And I realized I'm getting almost no happiness out of it. That for me, it's all in the moment. It's just
the doing it.
It's editing. It's trying to figure things out, and that makes me feel a little safe that I'm in the process of trying to make something work out. And so that's not healthy either. And so to realize, oh, I need to find a way to be happy, not when something worked out, and not in the process, but just in nothing. And I am so far from accomplishing that.
Right. So that's the essential question, right? That's what every comedian wonders: do you have to be miserable to be funny? Every comedian's history and background and reason that they, realized they were funny and they started to do comedy in one form or another, it has some roots in trauma and pain and sadness.
Not misery, but maybe annoyance.
Jesus, why be miserable? What's the upside in that?
So when I see a vegetable tray, I'm annoyed. I'm like, no one wants that. Why are you putting it out there? Trying to pretend that you're healthy? People are just going to eat the guacamole. Don't even put out the radishes. What is this, a Seder? No one's going to eat that.
I think people who don't quite fit in, given the subject today, and find an outlet in comedy and find that that's the thing where if the steam lets out, if you can just find that knob and make a joke out of it, I think that happens, and I think it's one of the great reasons for comedy.
I'm not personally miserable. I make those around me miserable. You know what makes people miserable? My gesturing.
But he had said at one point, he goes, I have my foot on the stool. And I was like, what does that mean? And then I was like, oh my God, literally. Like, he's thinking about not living anymore. And I'm like, how could somebody this funny and original not want to live? So I said, hey, man, before you think about killing yourself, why don't you go record a podcast? And he goes, yeah, that's the cure for death. I was like, it could be. I was like, every time you're on Smodcast with me, people love you. People love Walt. They think you guys are funny and original and stuff. 3 weeks after he records the first podcast, he sends me this email where he's like, I backed off the stool. And I was like, it's the talking cure, dude. As long as you're always candid with them, it's win-win. The audience will stick by you and be like, this motherfucker's, he will tell me horrible things about himself. Like, he'll tell me that he takes fucking dick medicine because don't get hard or whatever. He'll tell us. If he'll tell us that, next 10 things he says are fucking honest and shit.
It's more of just accepting who he was, man. I think once my mom was okay with it, I was okay with it. As long as I saw that it was hurting her and she was having a tough time on her birthday, that was the day he chose to end his life, then I didn't enjoy any of it. But once I saw that she was more comfortable, and once she saw that I had done what I did and I wasn't going to fall down that route, it's just not in me. I think everybody has that moment at some point in their life of, are people better off without me? And your brain's either going to allow you to pull a trigger or take some pills, or it's not, and mine won't. So and we had that conversation. So once she knew that, everything else was kind of just sort of fell into place. There's still things I can't possibly wrap my head around, but I'm just wired differently than my father was. You know what I mean? I'm not as funny as him. He's not as cool as me. It's just that's the way it goes.
He was just like, I'm so far away from the stool at this point, and it's all from talking about who I am, and who I am was who I hated the most. That put me toward a stool. So this was a guy who never thought about doing comedy, but comedy saved his fucking life. And it's not traditional comedy in the way like you define a guy at a mic, stand on a little stage with a mic. It was a guy talking out his shit, but with an inability to do it in a dry way or in a serious way. He has to deflate his own balloon constantly. And in doing so, like, sharpened his comedic chops, introduced himself to an audience who were like, we like what you have to say. Suddenly he can make a living off of doing that stuff. And not just make a living like pay his bills, but he can live. He's living because of this.
I wanted to tell him, like, I booked my first job, right? I booked, there was a show called Family Matters with Urkel, right? Everybody knows Urkel. And I had like 4 lines. I was a kid who brought a gun to school, and they were trying to get me, don't I look thuggish? Don't I look like a bad kid? And
who would say, get me Freddie Prinze Jr. for the kid who comes to school with a gun?
Yeah, right? That's the only role I book, is the gangster, right? Scooby-Doo was way gangster. So I booked this job, and I was crazy excited. The audition was at Warner Brothers. Forest Lawn is right behind Warner Brothers. I drove straight there, and I just had to say sorry, and I had to say thank you, and I had to get angry. All in one conversation. It was like, thank you, I love you, fuck you. It was everything, but it all came out, and it was just, when you can sort of vomit emotion like that, everything else starts to kind of mellow out. And then when people tell you stories about your dad fucking everything in LA but his wife, it doesn't hurt as bad because you kind of have gone through way worse. So, you know, as far as my mom's relationship with it, she has to believe what she has to believe, and I respect that, and she very well could be right, you know, but for me to get by and for me to accept in any way, shape, or form what kind of a man he was, then I had to be okay with how I perceived it and how I saw it.
When someone dies, the last thing you think of is, did they do the dishes? You're like, oh my God, I hope he had enough sex. I hope he was happy. You know, it's awful.
You know, once we started speaking honestly about ourselves and having a point of view and not just being, you know, a type of clown, once comics started to talk out loud about their life and the life around them, people made this assumption like, well, they're all incredibly fucked up. But I think that's a mischaracterization. I think that struggle is necessary, but I don't think misery is necessary.
You know, it's an interesting thing. Maybe you had to be insecure to be funny. Maybe that's part of it. You don't have to be miserable. But there has to be something wrong with you.
I don't think, in theory, one needs to be miserable to be funny. But I don't know anyone close to me that's not miserable. The people I know really well that are the funniest are the most miserable. I'm not miserable. I think I'm just indifferent.
I'm miserable right now because of what I'm going through with my finances. And at 58, I didn't want to be in this position. And whoever said money doesn't buy happiness, I hope you're fucking dead, because you're an idiot. Because you know what? I'm only miserable because I'm so depressed, because I'm working so hard for so little. But there's a lot of people doing a lot worse than I am, you know? At least you got your health. Whatever Jewish idiot said that, you're wrong. Health is good, money's good. The combination is just great.
And I've talked about this on stage a lot. I've suffered from depression, been on and off antidepressants for the last probably 10 years or so. And at times I've been suicidal, and not because of comedy, but just, you know, other pressures from the world and whatever. And I realised that happiness isn't all about stand-up comedy. And I've only realised that just recently. And people ask you in interviews, they go, how would you like to be remembered? And I've got to come to terms with, I might not be remembered, and that doesn't matter. The only thing I care about now is how my son remembers me. And if everyone else sort of liked me, that's all right. But as long as he thinks I was a good guy, you know, when my dad dies, I don't think he was just a carpenter. I don't think he's going to be remembered by the whole world, but he'll be remembered by me. And that's, I'm working on making that more important than being remembered as a great comedian.
Everyone's miserable. Everyone has misery in their lives. But really, you know, misery is just a form of dissatisfaction. And so maybe comedy is really just taking dissatisfaction and discomfort and spinning it in a way that helps you deal with it, and then people relate to it.
I think you at least have to know misery. I don't think comedians corner the market on loneliness and need for attention, but I think they have to know it, certainly.
Yeah.
I think that's where it comes from. Sort of a fear and a protection of that fear to this day, there's nowhere that I'm funnier than in a doctor's office. Because I'm a little scared, and I'm hilarious in a doctor's office.
I bartended for a long time. Let me just tell you, the general public's kind of miserable. I don't think it's because... I think we just have a faster track to misery, and it's more available. I mean, we walk into work, our job, and somebody goes, "You want a shot?" Well, that doesn't happen at IBM. You don't show up at 9 in the morning, there's a guy with a bottle of peach schnapps. "Hey, you in?" So if you are leaning towards any bad habits, this is the perfect lifestyle to engage in. But again, rule follower. Control. I'm never going to go. I'm not shooting heroin with you by the trash can at 9. What are you, crazy?
I do try to, on some level, even if I'm telling a joke about a gaping butthole, I do try to have it colored by the fact that I like people, I enjoy being alive, and...
Grateful you don't have a gaping butthole.
Yeah, not yet, you know?
You know, the self-loathing darkness, where you wake up 3 o'clock in the morning and kind of go, but this is old Steve Martin bit, where you just kind of like go in, you sprinkle some water in your face, and you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, "What is happening to me?
Yeah.
Why am I in this hotel?" By the way, I figured that out 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
That would be 54.5 years of living in self-loathing darkness. So you get past that, and things seem to be a little bit better, don't they?
I had a panic attack on stage once that was terrifying because I did not know there was such a thing as panic attacks. The thought of having to be on stage for another 50 minutes and then 2 more hours after that was unendurable. And I walked off stage, and I walked out of the club, and the club owner was in the lobby, and he looked at me and he went, "Who's on stage right now?" And I just went, "No one." And I walked into the men's room, and I just stood in the stall for a minute, and it kind of passed. Then I finally got to the right doctor, who said, "I think you might want to take a pill for this." And he just died. He said, "Yeah, panic disorder. People have it." My sort of hippy-dippy friends would say, like, "You know, you're still feeling the anxiety. You're just masking it with medication." And I go, "Yeah, yes." That's what it says on the label of the prescription, masks. In the winter, I still feel the cold. I mask it with a coat. What? Because I'm a coward.
I wrote Swingers after suffering from a breakup. That aspect was autobiographical. And through the experience of writing that thing alone in my rented room, I was pouring my heart and soul into this thing. And then by the time I had to perform it, I wasn't really connected with that pain anymore. And then by the time I showed it, there was laughter and the opposite of the feeling I felt in the breakup, because I was now connected with these thousands of people around the world. And everybody who saw it or a screening I went to, now I felt like I was part of a collective. I felt like people understood me, I understood them, and we shared a heart.
I've done a lot of plays in Midtown, Broadway, and whatever, and like I'll do the walk. I'll do the 40 block walk, full talking to myself, reliving shit that just happened, having full conversations with people that I wanted to have. Fucking, why the fuck do you keep doing this? Something like that. You know, you want to have that conversation, you don't. You have it with the other guy, and you're like, I swear, tomorrow I'm going to say something. It doesn't happen, but I get it all out, like in 40 blocks, walking and talking. Nobody fucking bothers me. I think artists are, you know, brave people, but we're fucked up.
Yes, there are really fucked up people in show business. The people that talk about how fucked up people are in show business, have they met anyone that's not in show business? The same pain, the same suffering, the same angst, the same tortures, the same doubts, the same misery are all there. In show business, you show what you're feeling. So yes, they show the angst, but they're showing the angst of humanity, the angst that we all share. If you had a comic that truly had experiences that were outside of the realm of the general humanity, no one would go see them.
Right now, I'm still making the decision of, am I a comedian? I shuffle the job title on the web with what I do first, depending on what I'm doing. And I'm a comedian, and I'm proud to be a comedian. It took me a really long time to take out the word American and put comedian. Don't you take my truck, I'm a comedian.
You know, we'll do a montage at the end.
It can be viewed as questionable babysitting. I'm in charge of these people, but I shouldn't be. But I am, and let's just hope it doesn't get weird.
To this day, I don't know what happened. I don't. All of a sudden, it went from them loving me to them hating me.
But maybe I'm not that funny, so I'm not that fucked up. That's the consolation.
It's the best type of conversation you'll have. You're talking and someone's listening, right? It's the narcissist fantasy.
Don't ruin it for everybody.
With your feelings?
Exactly. This whole thing about feelings, I just, I couldn't absorb it.
Yeah.
Even though I had them.
I made a girl cry in college. I feel bad.
I'm a horrible person. They hate me. This is the end of my life and career. I will never recover. They will never like me again. I'm stupid. It's all of that put together.
I used to be a smartass in class, and I get sent to the principal's office, and now...
You get sent to the bank.
I get sent to the bank.
If the ego is making the decisions, then you're never going to be satisfied.
It's also hard to imagine somebody anywhere near normal writing the great American novel. You know, I think.
Exposing the absurdity of life, like its preposterous pointlessness.
Not just like, oh, it's a powerful drug and you can make a lot of people laugh and it feels great to make people laugh. Comedy can save your fucking life.
I think artists are, you know, brave people, but we're fucked up, and like, you know, the difference between like us and the guy who, you know, kills a whole bunch of people, you know, is not that wide. It's very small.
I don't believe you have to be miserable to be funny, but I do believe you have to be miserable to be really funny.
I hate to say it. I really do. I just think you're funnier when you're miserable. I think you are. I think it's funny. You laugh at how miserable you were. I think that's what makes you laugh. Because you're just going, oh, that was awful. My life is awful. And then you're like, wait, my life is awful. And they're like, yeah, that was awful and that was bad. And then you're like, you're through your whole Mead notebook of like all these things. Oh my God, that was awful too. And you're excited how awful things were because that feeds you. It feeds the beast. So sadly, I don't know. I think yes, you have to be miserable to be funny, but there's ways you can turn it on and off. And the older you get, you'll figure how to enjoy parts of your life. Yeah, I wish I had a better answer. It's so sad. It's so true. Oh my God.
Cut. Great. Genius. Perfect. Perfect.
What does everyone say? What does everyone say?